One rejection after another. Alone in a crowd. Harvard said no. 30 jobs said no. But failure wasn't an option. Then the spark of the internet. Alibaba was born. Growth exploded unstoppable. Facing giants head-on. Breaking records worldwide. Jack Ma legendary.
A lone applicant stands outside a fast food restaurant in Hangzhou, China, clutching a rejection slip. 24 people had applied for KFC's first branch in the city. 23 were hired. He was the only one turned away. It was hardly his first rejection. He'd failed the college entrance exam twice and even been dismissed by the police academy with a terse, "You're no good." 10 times he applied to Harvard University, and 10 times he opened a thin envelope with the same response denied. Most people would have surrendered their ambitions. But this young man was Ma Yun, better known as Jack Ma, and his story had only begun. In the span of a few decades, Jack Ma would transform himself from a humble, repeatedly rejected job seeker into the charismatic founder of a $500 billion empire. In 2014, the world watched in awe as Alibaba, the company Ma built from scratch, shattered records with a massive IPO in New York, raising over $21.8 billion later, expanded to $25 billion. Once an object of pity, Jack Ma had become a symbol of triumph over adversity, Alibaba's dragon, rising from obscurity to breathe fire into the world of e-commerce. The journey of Jack Ma is one of staggering contrasts. It's the tale of an underdog who refused to give up, a visionary who saw connections where others saw none, and an irrepressible optimist who turned every setback into fuel for a future victory. This documentary story will chart Ma's incredible path, from his childhood in a sleepy Chinese city and the sting of endless rejections, to his first encounter with the internet and the founding of Alibaba in a small apartment. We will follow his battles against corporate giants, the bold bets that paid off, and some that nearly didn't, and the guiding philosophy that today is hard, tomorrow will be worse, but the day after tomorrow will be sunshine. Through inspirational highs and formidable lows, Jack Ma's life offers lessons in perseverance, innovation, and the power of dreaming big when the odds are overwhelmingly against you. Hooked by failure but propelled by vision, Jack Ma's rise from underdog to icon is a story that resonates far beyond China's borders. It speaks to anyone who has ever been told they're not good enough, and it reminds us that sometimes the ones who don't get picked are the ones destined to blaze a trail for others. As we delve into Jack Ma Alibaba's dragon, prepare to witness how an ordinary man with extraordinary tenacity rewrote the rules of the internet age. Humble beginnings and early failures. Jack Ma was born Ma Yun on September 10, 1964 in Hangzhou, a historic city in eastern China. He grew up in a time when China was emerging from decades of isolation and foreign visitors were still a rarity. Young Jack was a curious-spirited boy, not particularly tall or strong, who quickly learned to rely on wits and charm over brawn. From the time he was 10 years old, he showed an uncanny determination to broaden his horizons. Every morning he would hop on his bicycle and pedal 40 minutes to Hangzhou's main hotel just to practice English with any foreign tourists he could find. In exchange for free guided tours around the city's picturesque West Lake, the boy eagerly absorbed new phrases and stories. It was an unusual hobby in 1970s China, but it gave Ma a window to the wider world. In fact, it was an Australian tourist who nicknamed him Jack, finding Ma Yun hard to pronounce. The name stuck, and so did Jack's early self-education in language and people skills. This daily ritual, a small boy riding determinedly through morning mist to greet strangers, was the first hint of the global vision that would later define his career. Academics, however, did not come as easily. Ma struggled especially with mathematics in school. He failed China's national college entrance exam twice, scoring poorly in math each time. Stubbornly, he took the grueling exam a third time and finally earned admission in 1984 to what was then Hangzhou Teachers College, now Hangzhou Normal University. There, he majored in English, leveraging the language passion he'd cultivated as a teen. When he graduated in 1988, Jack became an English teacher at a local university, earning the equivalent of only $12 to $15 a month. Modest as the pay was, Ma enjoyed teaching. The classroom allowed his natural storytelling ability and optimism to shine. Yet, in the back of his mind, bigger dreams were percolating. Dreams that extended beyond the confines of a state teacher's salary. But the road forward was anything but smooth. With a diploma in hand, Jack Ma sought opportunities to better provide for his family. He soon discovered that society wasn't as receptive as the tourists who indulged his questions. He reportedly applied for dozens of jobs, 30 different jobs by his own count, and was rejected from every single one. "I went for a job with the police. They said, 'You're no good,'" Ma recalled in an interview. The most infamous snub came when KFC opened in Hangzhou. 24 people applied and 23 were accepted. Jack was the only person rejected by the fried chicken franchise. It was a telling moment. Even to fry chicken or wait tables, Ma was deemed unqualified. These anecdotes have become legend, but at the time they were painfully real blows to a young man trying to find his footing. One rejection could be dismissed as bad luck, but dozens of rejections. It felt like a pattern, one that could have broken Jack's spirit. He also nurtured an unlikely ambition for a Chinese youth of the era attending Harvard University. He applied not once, not twice, but 10 times to Harvard's programs, and 10 times he was summarily turned down. Years later, he would laugh about it, saying he might have been accepted on the 11th try. But he didn't bother applying again. Such repeated refusal would deter most people permanently. Jack himself later reflected that he was used to failure by the age of 30. "I had probably more than 30 jobs or job attempts, and all failed. I applied for KFC. I applied for police. 5 people, 4 accepted. I was the only guy. I applied for even a waiter's job at a 4-star hotel. They said, 'No, you're not good enough.'" Each setback could have been the end of the story, but Ma treated them as necessary trials on the way to something else. With characteristic resilience, he shrugged off each no and kept looking for the yes that would change his life. This period of Ma's life, in hindsight, was forging the iron will that later helped him build Alibaba. Rejection taught him humility, but also persistence. If you don't give up, you still have a chance. Giving up is the greatest failure, Ma would later say, a philosophy he was living long before he ever articulated it. Out of options in the traditional job market, Jack returned to what he knew well: teaching and entrepreneurship, albeit on a very small scale. In 1994, he opened a humble translation agency, the Haibo Translation Agency in Hangzhou, offering English translation services to local businesses. It wasn't a ticket to wealth, but it was a start, a way to apply his language skills and make a name for himself. Little did he know that this small venture would soon pave the way to an entirely new world. Jack Ma's early failures, academic, professional, and personal, were in fact sowing the seeds for his later success. Each rejection was teaching him something: the value of endurance, the courage to try unconventional paths, and the optimism to keep pushing forward. Those lessons would prove invaluable when destiny came knocking in the form of a new technology that was about to take the world and Jack Ma by storm: the internet. The spark: discovering the internet. In early 1995, Jack Ma found himself on a trip to the United States, a journey arranged thanks to his fledgling translation business and his reputation as an English speaker. He had been invited to help resolve a business dispute involving a Chinese company and an American counterpart. It was Jack's first time stepping outside of China. Arriving in California by some accounts, Seattle, the 30-year-old teacher turned entrepreneur, was about to encounter something completely foreign: the World Wide Web. At that time, the internet was scarcely known in China. It was a novelty even in the West, and Ma had never used a computer beyond typing and sending emails. But curiosity was ever his guide. A friend in Seattle showed Jack how to connect a desktop computer to the internet. Legend has it that the first word Jack Ma ever searched for online was beer. He found pages about American beer, German beer, Japanese beer, but to his surprise, no information on Chinese beer. In fact, there was barely any content about China at all. In that instant, Jack glimpsed a huge opportunity. Ma realized that if the internet was truly the future, then China, with its rich culture and millions of businesses, needed to be online. Inspired, he and his friend quickly cobbled together a rudimentary website listing Jack's translation agency services. Within hours of launching, Jack started receiving emails from people around the world interested in Chinese translation. He was astonished. Never before had he seen something facilitate global connections so effortlessly. That brief exposure to the web was a revelation. In Jack Ma's own words, "When I first touched the keyboard of a computer, I never knew that one day this thing would change my life." He returned to China fired up with a vision to bring the internet to his countrymen and help Chinese businesses reach global markets online. Later that same year, 1995, Jack poured his passion into co-founding one of China's earliest internet companies, China Pages. It was essentially an online directory for businesses, a way to help Chinese companies create a web presence and attract international customers. Jack started China Pages from a small office using slow dial-up connections and crude early web tools. There was no playbook. He was operating on intuition and what he'd observed abroad. In Jack's mind, this would be China's answer to Silicon Valley's nascent internet boom. For the first time, he stepped into the role of a tech entrepreneur, despite knowing little about programming. "I know nothing about technology," he later admitted with a grin, but that didn't stop him. What he did know was how to rally people around an idea. China Pages met with early successes in generating buzz. State-run TV even covered Jack's venture as an example of a new possibilities in the information age. However, the business climate was challenging. Internet usage in China was almost non-existent in 1995, and few understood Jack's vision. On top of that, China Pages faced stiff competition from a powerful adversary, Hangzhou Telecom. The state-backed telephone company noticed Ma's idea and launched its own competing online Yellow Pages, unfairly leveraging its government connections and infrastructure. With virtually unlimited resources, the telecom company's clone, cheekily named Chinese Page, squeezed China Pages out of the market. After 2 trying years, Jack Ma reluctantly bowed out of his first internet venture. It was a bitter defeat. His fledgling startup had been outmuscled by an entity he couldn't hope to match at the time. Yet, in typical Jack Ma fashion, he did not view it as a failure so much as a learning experience. He had seen the power of the internet and confirmed the potential for connecting Chinese businesses with the world. The key was to find the right angle and timing to make it work. In 1997, Ma accepted a job in Beijing under the Ministry of Foreign Trade's auspices, heading an initiative to build an official online commerce platform. This move might seem surprising, from entrepreneur back to a government job, but Jack saw it as another learning opportunity. For 2 years, he gained insight into how larger organizations and the government itself were approaching the internet. He built connections and observed, but he also felt constrained. The bureaucracy of a state-backed project was not for him. He later remarked that if he stayed with the government, he would miss out on the real opportunities of the internet revolution. By 1999, with the dot-com wave sweeping across the globe, Jack Ma knew it was now or never time to strike out on his own terms once again. He famously quit his secure job and gathered his old friends and colleagues, persuading them to leave Beijing and join him back in Hangzhou for a daring new venture. Jack was 34, brimming with the enthusiasm of a startup founder, and resolutely convinced that the internet could empower small businesses in a way nothing else could. What he planned next would not be just an online directory, but a full-fledged trading platform, a digital bridge between China's millions of small manufacturers and the global marketplace. It was an idea ambitious even by Silicon Valley standards, and it would be called Alibaba. Founding Alibaba dreaming big in a small apartment. In a modest apartment located at Lakeview Garden in Hangzhou, Jack Ma gathered a group of 17 close friends and former students in February 1999. Crammed into the cramped living room, this motley crew listened as Jack, sporting his trademark wide grin and animated hand gestures, laid out his vision for a new kind of internet company. The atmosphere was charged with excitement and uncertainty. Many of these people had been with Jack through China Pages or the Ministry Project, and they trusted his passion, even if the plan sounded nebulous. On a simple whiteboard, Jack scrawled 2 words, Alibaba Group. He explained that the name was inspired by the tale of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves from 1001 Nights, a name he believed the whole world could pronounce and remember. Alibaba brings to mind open sesame, he told them, evoking the magic words that revealed hidden treasure in the story. Open sesame symbolized opening a doorway to hidden riches, and to Jack the riches were the opportunities for small businesses. This platform will open a doorway to fortune for small enterprises, he declared, echoing the company's mission to unlock treasure for small businesses everywhere. To test the name's global appeal, Jack had even walked around overseas in San Francisco, asking random strangers if they knew Alibaba. They all responded, yes. Open Sesame, confirming to Jack that he had picked a universally resonant name. Alibaba, he said, was also a kind, clever character who helps his village, not a thief. A young man who's willing to help others, as Jack later emphasized. It was a perfect embodiment of the company's mission to help the little guys, the small and medium businesses, prosper through the internet. The vision Jack Ma pitched in that apartment was grandiose, especially given their starting point. He wanted to create a business-to-business online marketplace where Chinese manufacturers, no matter how small, could directly reach buyers across the globe. This was 1999. Fewer than 1% of Chinese were internet users, and even globally, e-commerce was still in its infancy. Jack framed the challenge starkly. Our competitors are not in China, he told the team. Our competitors are in America's Silicon Valley. In a scene later captured in a documentary, Ma, wearing a simple suit coat, exuded quiet confidence as he said, Americans are strong at hardware and systems, but on information and software, Chinese brains are just as good as theirs. This is the reason we dare to compete with Americans. Such statements were bold, even nationalistic, and they fired up his colleagues. Here was a former English teacher who openly admitted he wasn't a tech expert, proclaiming that a small Chinese startup could take on the likes of Amazon, eBay, or any Western tech titan, and he said it not in Beijing or Shanghai, but in Hangzhou, a city hardly known then for technology. It felt a bit like David gearing up to face Goliath with nothing but conviction and a slingshot of an idea. To fund this venture, Jack and his co-founders pooled their savings, scraping together around $60,000 in seed capital. The founding team was a family of true believers. Among them were Jack's wife, Zhang Ying, who had stood by him since his teaching days, and a handful of friends who had seen him fail and get back up again. Jack laid one rule on the table early. Even though they were all co-founders, none of them would automatically become high-ranking executives just by virtue of being there at the start. He insisted they might need to bring in experienced managers from outside to grow the company. This egalitarian, if somewhat demotivating, stance was Jack's attempt to ensure the company had professional leadership when needed. However, he later admitted that telling his loyal partners they couldn't be bosses was one of his biggest mistakes. The lessons I learned from the dark days at Alibaba are that you've got to make your team have value innovation and vision, Ma reflected. Recognizing that keeping his team motivated was crucial, it was a rocky start culturally But ultimately, the shared mission held them together. They launched the website Alibaba.com in the spring of 1999. Initially, it was a simple online bulletin board where Chinese exporters could post product listings and global buyers could browse and make connections. At first, there were few users, but Jack and his team worked around the clock, often in that same apartment, to recruit businesses onto the platform. They would often act as middlemen themselves, manually linking sellers with interested buyers and ensuring inquiries were answered. Jack's enthusiasm was infectious. He famously would punch the air and shout Alibaba to keep energy high during long work nights. The early team has recalled how Jack motivated them with his vision of the future, painting mental pictures of the prosperity that small businesses could achieve by embracing the internet. He wasn't offering high salaries or perks. He had none to give, but he offered something more powerful: belief. As one co-founder later said, "It was not business success we were sure of, but we were sure that Jack Ma would succeed at whatever he put his heart to," highlighting the personal magnetism Jack had even then. However, charisma alone couldn't guarantee success. Those first few years were incredibly tough. Alibaba did not turn a profit for the first 3 years. The dot-com bubble was inflating and about to burst, and many internet companies with far more funding were crashing around them. Alibaba came perilously close to running out of money. At one point early on, Alibaba was just 18 months away from bankruptcy, a fact Jack later openly acknowledged. They had expanded rapidly, hiring faster than their revenue could support, and the global dot-com crash of 2000 dried up many investment opportunities. "I call Alibaba U1A001 mistakes," Jack joked, referring to all the errors and hurdles in those years. Yet unlike many contemporaries, Alibaba survived. Why? One reason was Jack Ma's relentless hunt for strategic partners who shared his long-term vision. In 2000, during the darkest hours of the dot-com bust, Jack Ma met a Japanese technology investor who would change Alibaba's fortunes: Masayoshi Son, the founder of SoftBank. Son saw in Jack something extraordinary. "Other entrepreneurs I met did not have the true belief in their heart. I can feel it," Son recalled. "We are the same animal. We are both a little crazy," he said of his first impressions of Jack Ma, acting on gut instinct. Masayoshi Son invested $20 million in Alibaba in late 2000 for a roughly 30% stake. At the time, Alibaba had almost no revenue and no business model beyond connecting buyers and sellers. Son famously didn't even demand a detailed business plan. Jack's passion and vision were enough. Initially, Jack was hesitant to take such a large sum. Son had actually offered $50 million, but Jack felt that was more than they could responsibly use and convinced him to scale back. This massive vote of confidence gave Alibaba a lifeline and, more importantly, breathing room to grow. Buoyed by SoftBank's funding and Jack's evolving leadership, Alibaba steadily built out its platform through the early 2000s. Small businesses were signing up in droves, finding value in Alibaba's online marketplace to reach customers they otherwise never could. Alibaba started generating income by charging exporters membership fees for verified status on the platform, a trust badge for global buyers, and higher fees for those who wanted to list products for international sale. Trust was always a cornerstone of Jack's strategy. To further bolster confidence in online deals, the team in 2003 created Alipay, an escrow-based payment system that would hold a buyer's payment and only release it to the seller when the buyer confirmed receipt of goods. It was an elegant solution to a huge problem: lack of trust in e-commerce transactions. In the beginning, banks and regulators were wary of Alipay. Moving money online without a traditional bank involved sounded risky, even unlawful to them. Many advisors called it the stupidest idea Jack Ma ever had, fearing it would never work. But Jack didn't flinch. "I didn't care if it was stupid as long as people could use it," he said defiantly. He had faith that solving customers' pain points was more important than pleasing established institutions or doubters. That bet paid off massively. Hundreds of millions of people eventually came to use Alipay, which would become the financial pillar of the entire Alibaba ecosystem. By solving the trust issue, Alibaba removed the last barrier for small businesses to trade online, further fueling the company's growth. By the mid-2000s, what started as a scrappy apartment operation had grown into one of the most promising internet companies in China. The team had moved out of Jack's apartment and into proper offices. Their workforce expanded, and so did their ambitions. Jack Ma was now the captain of a ship that was catching serious momentum. But Alibaba's journey was about to face its most formidable external test yet, a showdown with a global giant that had set its sights on China's e-commerce market. The stage was set for a David versus Goliath battle in Jack's own backyard, one that would either make Alibaba the dominant player at home or crush it under an international competitor. The opponent, eBay, the American auction powerhouse, and Jack Ma, armed with his wits, his loyal team, and an unshakable commitment to helping the little guy, was ready to face the fight of his life. David versus Goliath. Battling eBay and the rise of Taobao. In 2003, fresh off the early growth of Alibaba's B2B platform, Jack Ma was already looking ahead. He understood that while Alibaba.com connected businesses, there was another burgeoning opportunity: consumer e-commerce. Globally, eBay had popularized the model of individuals selling to other individuals online. In China, a similar space was wide open, at least for the moment. Sensing the tide, Jack rallied a small skunkworks team within Alibaba to develop a new platform that could empower small merchants and ordinary folks to sell goods online inside China. In May 2003, working under secrecy in a lakeside apartment to keep the project under wraps from potential competitors, Alibaba launched Taobao, meaning searching for treasure in Chinese. It was a fledgling consumer-to-consumer C2C marketplace, like a Chinese version of eBay. What Jack perhaps didn't know when Taobao went live was just how urgently it was needed. Because eBay was already on its way into China, armed with deep pockets and global experience. eBay had entered the Chinese market by acquiring a local auction site called EachNet in 2002. By the time Taobao appeared in mid-2003 eBay, EachNet commanded an impressive 80% market share in China's online person-to-person trading. On paper, eBay was the Goliath to Taobao's David, a NASDAQ-listed US giant, versus a tiny domestic upstart. Meg Whitman, eBay's CEO at the time, saw China as a strategic expansion and was determined to transplant eBay's model into the country. But Jack Ma had a strategy to differentiate Taobao in a way that resonated with Chinese users. He often said, "You must treat your competitors like a teacher and learn from their strengths and failures." What did he learn from eBay? That eBay's strength, monetizing via fees, could be a weakness in China. eBay charged users to list items and took a cut of transactions as it did elsewhere in the world. Jack decided Taobao would initially charge no fees at all to buyers or sellers. It was completely free to use, a risky move as it meant no immediate revenue. But it would attract users rapidly. "Our goal is simple," Jack declared. "Focus on building the customer base, not on making money right now." Indeed, Taobao's early motto could have been, "Customers first, profits later." This was a classic Jack Ma approach. Get the flywheel spinning by providing value and worry about monetization after you've won the market. Taobao also introduced features tailored to local culture and trust building. One notable feature was an instant messaging tool embedded in the site, allowing buyers and sellers to chat in real time. A feature that strongly appealed to Chinese users who preferred personal interaction before making transactions. eBay's platform, in contrast, was more impersonal and driven by auctions. Jack Ma recognized that success in China required more than just translating a website. It meant understanding user behavior at a cultural level. Meg Whitman later acknowledged this, stating, "One of the defining characteristics of winning e-commerce is thinking globally, but acting locally. And that's exactly where eBay faltered and Taobao excelled, while eBay essentially copied and pasted its US model into the Chinese market. Jack Ma cultivated Taobao like a local marketplace, colorful, community-driven, and tailored to the everyday realities of Chinese small vendors and shoppers. When eBay realized Taobao was gaining traction, a corporate tug-of-war ensued. eBay ramped up its investment in each net and even had Meg Whitman publicly declare that eBay would crush any local rival, a statement she later denied, using word for word. Jack Ma was characteristically undaunted. He responded with an almost playful defiance. In a now famous metaphor, he likened the battle to a crocodile in the Yangtze River versus a shark in the ocean. eBay may be a shark in the ocean, but if it fights the crocodile in the Yangtze, the shark will lose. This vivid imagery captured Jack's belief that a homegrown company attuned to local consumers could defeat a global giant on its own turf. The Taobao team printed t-shirts with slogans, and the entire company operated with a warrior spirit. When eBay slashed its fees to win back users, Jack doubled down on offering free services, refusing to be outpaced. Internally, Alibaba staff watched their irrepressible founder throw himself into the battle. Jack would often quote his favorite film, Forrest Gump, to inspire perseverance. "Today is cruel. Tomorrow is crueler. And the day after tomorrow is beautiful." The message was clear. If they endured the struggle, the reward would come. One pivotal advantage for Taobao was the existence of Alipay. Introduced around the same time Alipay solved the trust issue in consumer transactions by escrowing payments, ensuring that money would only be released once buyers confirmed receipt of goods. By contrast, on eBay's each net, buyers and sellers often had to arrange payment and delivery independently, a cumbersome process in a country where credit card use was still rare. Taobao's integrated Alipay made transactions safer, smoother, and gave users the confidence to shop online. eBay's leadership, however, publicly dismissed these innovations. In one revealing scene from the documentary, Crocodile and the Yangtze, Jack Ma and his colleague Porter Erisman discussed eBay's reaction to Taobao's momentum. eBay has already come back with a response, saying, "Free is not a business model." Erisman told Jack. Jack just smiled. He had heard that line before. To eBay's executives, Taobao's free strategy seemed unsustainable, even desperate. But Jack was playing the long game. He was willing to sacrifice short-term revenue in order to earn user loyalty. As he stated in Alibaba's core values, customer first, employees, second, shareholders, third, meaning that if you take care of customers and empower your team, profits and shareholder value will follow. This philosophy was not just a slogan, it defined Jack Ma's strategy throughout the battle with eBay. By 2005, the results of Jack Ma's long game strategy were undeniable. Taobao had overtaken eBay in China, capturing over 60% of the market, while eBay's share plummeted. By 2007, Taobao's market share had climbed to approximately 67%, effectively dominating China's C2C e-commerce landscape. eBay, seeing the writing on the wall, made a stunning retreat. In 2006, it entered a partnership to offload its Chinese operations to local firm Tom Online, and by 2007, the eBay brand had virtually disappeared from China. The shark had been chased out of the Yangtze. It was a true David versus Goliath victory, one that cemented Jack Ma's status in China as a savvy, fearless entrepreneur who could go head-to-head with Silicon Valley's giants and win. One Chinese newspaper went so far as to dub him Ma Wang, a play on his surname Ma, which means horse, to crown him the horse king, a king in China's emerging tech arena. Taobao's success carried implications beyond market share. It demonstrated the power of understanding the local customer. Jack Ma's insistence on putting customers first manifested in tangible localized innovations, a user-friendly site in Chinese features that addressed local consumer concerns, a sense of community through forums and rating systems, and, most critically, the trust bridge of Alipay. Each of these was a carefully crafted response to eBay's one-size-fits-all global model, and each played a role in building a groundswell of user loyalty. Sellers who had once embraced eBay began to migrate eagerly to Taobao, thankful for free listings and rising buyer traffic. Buyers, meanwhile, discovered a vibrant range of products, from handmade crafts to high-tech electronics, often at better prices. Just as importantly, they loved being able to message sellers directly. "Do you have this in red? Can you ship it by tomorrow?" Over time, Taobao became more than a marketplace. It became a cultural phenomenon. It redefined how Chinese people shop and ignited a revolution that made buying everything online not just convenient, but a new way of life. For Jack Ma, the victory over eBay was both personal and strategic. Personally, it validated his vision and unconventional methods. Strategically, it cleared the domestic playing field, allowing Alibaba to expand without a major foreign rival standing in its way. At this point, Alibaba had two solid pillars: the original Alibaba.com B2B platform connecting businesses, and the Taobao C2C platform connecting consumers. But Jack was far from done innovating. Around 2007, in the wake of his success, he expanded Taobao's reach by launching Taobao Mall, later rebranded as Tmall, a site designed for major brands and larger retailers to sell to Chinese consumers, delivering a more premium trusted shopping experience. By splitting Taobao into distinct platforms: Taobao Marketplace for consumer-to-consumer transactions, Tmall for business-to-consumer, and eTao as a shopping search engine. Jack Ma positioned Alibaba to serve every tier and segment of China's fast-growing e-commerce landscape. The defeat of eBay also brought Alibaba to the attention of global investors in a big way. Seeing how Jack Ma had outmaneuvered an American icon, foreign tech leaders began to regard him with newfound respect and perhaps a hint of awe. One of those watching closely was Jerry Yang, the co-founder of Yahoo. In 2005, Yahoo was seeking a stronger foothold in China and was deeply impressed by Alibaba's trajectory. That year, Yahoo invested $1 billion in Alibaba for a 40% stake, a staggering deal that instantly handed Jack Ma a massive war chest. In return, Jack agreed to take over Yahoo's China operations. While the partnership came with its share of challenges, Yahoo China under Alibaba didn't dominate the search engine space. As hoped, the capital infusion was transformative. With Yahoo and SoftBank as major stakeholders, Alibaba now had both financial firepower and international validation to fuel its next stage of growth. They handed Jack Ma a $1 billion and the keys to Yahoo China's business in exchange for that stake, one account noted. Capturing the immense trust and long-term vision Yahoo placed in Jack, in hindsight, it proved to be one of the savviest investments Yahoo ever made. That 40% stake would later be worth tens of billions. And it solidified Jack Ma's position as a rising star in the global tech world. By the end of the 2000s, Jack Ma had firmly established Alibaba as the unchallenged leader of e-commerce in China. What had started as a long-shot idea in a cramped Hangzhou apartment had grown into a multifaceted internet empire, from the B2B engine of Alibaba, calm to the consumer powerhouses Taobao and Tmall, to Alipay redefining digital payments, and further into online advertising, cloud computing, and beyond. Jack's unwavering focus on empowering users was paying off, not just in scale, but in deep customer loyalty. And his timing was flawless. China's internet population was soaring, the middle class was rising fast, and no competitor could match the ecosystem Alibaba had quietly built. The stage was now set for Alibaba to enter the global financial spotlight. As the 2010s loomed, Jack began contemplating what once would have seemed unimaginable for a man once rejected by KFC: an IPO that would not only shake the world's financial markets, but catapult him into the ranks of the richest people on Earth. And through it all, Jack remained grounded in the very values that brought him there: relentless customer focus, boundless ambition, and a fearless belief in thinking big. Global Ambition Growth Partnerships and a record IPO. With e-commerce dominance in China, secured Alibaba spent the late 2000s and early 2010s expanding its horizons, both in business scope and global visibility. Under Jack Ma's leadership, the company moved boldly into new industries, reflecting his deep belief in constant reinvention. In 2009, Alibaba launched AliCloud. Now, Alibaba Cloud building homegrown cloud computing infrastructure that could support its enormous web traffic and data demands. This forward-looking investment didn't just future-proof Alibaba's core services, it would also evolve into one of the world's leading cloud service providers. Jack often spoke of his dream to build a 102-year company, a business that would span 3 centuries from its founding in 1999 to the year 2101, and these expansions marked key steps on that long-term journey. Around the same time, Jack Ma guided a critical expansion of Alibaba's retail ecosystem. As the Chinese consumer market matured, shopping behavior began to split. Some users craved the quirky bargains of Taobao, while others sought the trust and quality of branded premium goods. Sensing this, early Alibaba officially launched Taobao Mall in 2008, renamed Tmall in 2011 to focus on business-to-consumer B2C sales. On Tmall, top international brands and major Chinese retailers opened official storefronts selling directly to China's growing base of brand-conscious buyers. This strategic move attracted global giants like Nike, Adidas, Apple, and an influx of luxury fashion houses, firmly positioning Tmall as the premier online mall for quality-focused consumers. Jack's decision to segment Alibaba's retail platforms into Taobao Marketplace, C2C, Tmall B2C, and eTao, a shopping search engine, reflected sharp market intuition and adaptability. The results were staggering. By 2012, Alibaba's platforms processed over 1 trillion yuan, roughly $160 billion USD in transactions, surpassing the combined volume of eBay and Amazon at the time. The scale was unprecedented, cementing Alibaba's role not just as a tech giant, but as a transformative force in China's modern retail economy. Amid this extraordinary growth, Jack Ma remained the unmistakable face of Alibaba, a diminutive figure with an outsized personality, now revered across China. He had cultivated rock star status, becoming not just a tech visionary, but a beloved cultural icon. The company culture at Alibaba, largely shaped by Jack's own ethos, became legendary for its balance of hard work, joy, and camaraderie. At annual celebrations, Jack routinely stunned employees with flamboyant performances. In 2009, during Alibaba's 10th anniversary, he took the stage dressed as a heavy metal frontman. In 2017, he appeared in full Michael Jackson regalia, black fedora sequin jacket, and moonwalked before 40,000 cheering employees. The image of one of China's richest men dancing to MJ hits was surreal, yet it only deepened his bond with the Alibaba team. Yes, that is a billionaire executive. Thrusting his hips to the sound of Michael Jackson, one reporter noted with amused disbelief. But these displays were never about ego. They were intentional. Jack was nurturing a culture where fun and big dreams mattered just as much as performance and grit. He wanted every Alecran Ali person to feel part of a purposeful, unconventional, and deeply connected family. It's no wonder Alibaba's employees became known for their loyalty drive and belief in the mission. By 2013, Alibaba was operating at full throttle, and conversations about going public were reaching a crescendo. Ever the forward thinker, Jack Ma made a bold, calculated move. He stepped down as CEO, handing the reins to a younger generation of leaders. First, Jonathan Liu, and later, Daniel Zhang. Jack remained as executive chairman, choosing to focus on long-term strategy, global expansion, and preserving the company's culture and vision. It was a classic Jack Ma move, planning not just for growth, but for sustainability. In a letter to employees, he wrote, "I always told myself and our team that we must prepare for one day Alibaba will be bigger than me, bigger than any single person." The upcoming IPO would put that philosophy to the ultimate test, turning Alibaba into a global financial titan, while challenging it to hold on to the soul Jack had so carefully built. On September 19, 2014, Alibaba Group made its long-anticipated debut on the New York Stock Exchange, NYSE, under the ticker BABA. What unfolded was nothing short of historic. Global investor demand surged as markets around the world scrambled to own a piece of the company that had come to dominate the largest internet market on the planet. Alibaba raised an astonishing $21.8 billion initially, and after underwriters exercised additional share options, the total climbed to $25 billion, the largest IPO in history at the time. The company's market value soared to $168 billion on the first day of trading, vaulting it ahead of giants like Facebook and putting it within striking distance of Amazon. For Jack Ma, once an English teacher earning $15 a month, the moment marked a personal triumph and a national milestone. Standing at the NYSE podium, surrounded by applauding financiers in sharp suits, he watched as the Chinese flag fluttered beside Alibaba's orange banner, a powerful symbol of China's entrepreneurial ascent on the world stage. The IPO wasn't just a financial milestone. It was the moment the world truly woke up to the scale of Alibaba and to the stature of Jack Ma himself. In the West, where many had previously underestimated the company, media outlets began describing Alibaba as Amazon, eBay, and PayPal all rolled into one, a nod to the vastness of its integrated ecosystem, which by then spanned e-commerce marketplaces, digital payments, logistics, networks, cloud computing, and more. At the time of the IPO, Alibaba's platforms were powering 279 million active buyers who placed 14.5 billion orders per year, figures that bordered on the surreal. What the world was beginning to grasp was that China's internet revolution was not merely catching up. It was blazing its own trail, often with greater speed, volume, and ambition than anyone in Silicon Valley had anticipated. Alibaba's rise signaled a shift in the global tech narrative the East was not just following, it was leading. Jack Ma marked Alibaba's IPO with a deeply personal gesture, a letter to investors included in the company's official prospectus. In it, he reaffirmed the philosophy that had guided Alibaba since its founding. "We will put customers first, employees second, and shareholders third," Jack wrote unapologetically. Citium.com. The line stood out immediately. On Wall Street, where shareholder value reigns supreme, here was a founder making it clear from the outset: if you're seeking quick profits, Alibaba may not be for you. I can see that investors who hear this for the first time may find it hard to understand, Jack acknowledged. But the only way for Alibaba to create long-term value for shareholders is to create value for customers. He emphasized that Alibaba would not chase short-term revenue at the expense of its core mission. "Our company will not make decisions based on short-term revenues or profits. Our strategies will be implemented with mission-driven long-term development in mind. We welcome investors with the same long-term mindset." Such candor was rare in a world of quarterly earnings and market pressure, and it highlighted the conviction Jack had in the company's path and culture. He was essentially telling the financial world, "Trust us to serve our users and stay true to our mission. And in the long run, everyone, employees, society, and shareholders will benefit." It was a philosophy forged through experience, born from early failures, sharpened in the battle with eBay, and ultimately proven by the massive user base and loyalty that made the IPO possible. The Alibaba IPO was also a moment of introspection for Jack. On the day of the listing, He thanked the 18 Luhan, a nickname for Alibaba's 18 founders, referencing the 18 arhats of Buddhist tradition and the countless employees who had contributed to the journey. He also spoke about responsibility, flush with success. Jack urged himself and his team to stay focused on their mission. Today, what we got is not money. What we got is the trust from people. He knew that expectations were now sky high. Alibaba's dragon had emerged onto the global stage, and many would be watching its next moves. In the years following the IPO, Alibaba continued to surge. It expanded its global footprint, launching AliExpress, an international shopping site, letting consumers worldwide buy directly from Chinese exporters, investing in e-commerce platforms in Southeast Asia like Lazada, and in India Paytm Mall, and even dipping into US retail with initiatives like 11 Main. Meanwhile, Alibaba's core businesses flourished at home. November 11th, Singles Day in China, became the world's biggest shopping festival under Alibaba's orchestration, routinely smashing sales records with tens of billions of dollars in sales in just 24 hours. Jack Ma had essentially created a new holiday through savvy marketing and understanding of consumer psychology. Through all of this, Jack's role gradually evolved. He was less involved in daily operations and more of a visionary ambassador for Alibaba and Chinese tech at large. He spoke at international forums, rubbed shoulders with presidents and celebrities, and always carried the aura of a man. As he once jokingly predicted in his youth, who might teach at Harvard one day after all those rejections. In January 2017, Jack met with US President-elect Donald Trump, discussing how Alibaba could help create American jobs by enabling small businesses to sell to China. He appeared in movies too, notably in a short kung fu film, Gong Shou Dao, where he, a Tai Chi enthusiast, sparred with martial arts legends on screen. These were the trappings of fame that Jack handled with humor and humility. He often reminded people that money and glamour hadn't changed him. He still thought like the scrappy entrepreneur or the teacher he once was. "I'm just a purist to heart," he said. "I'm not interested in wealth. I'm interested in dreams." Yet even as Alibaba soared, Jack knew when to step back further. In 2018, on his 54th birthday, he made a surprising announcement. He would retire as executive chairman of Alibaba in 1 year's time. He wanted to devote himself to philanthropy and education, returning to his roots as a teacher. This announcement was a testament to Jack's lifelong insistence on playing the long game. He was ensuring Alibaba's leadership transition while at the peak of success, to avoid succession crises and to challenge the company to innovate without him at the helm daily. True to his word, in September 2019, Jack Ma stepped down as chairman, handing the reins to his successor, Daniel Zhang. At an extravagant farewell celebration in a stadium, Jack, ever the showman, performed on stage in a rock star costume singing "You Raise Me Up" to thousands of cheering employees, tears and smiles on many faces. It was the end of an era, but by no means the end of Jack's influence or involvement in the world of business and philanthropy. Having taken Alibaba from a tiny apartment to one of the world's most valuable companies, Jack Ma was now poised to enter a new chapter of life. But just as he began pivoting towards giving back and enjoying the fruits of his work, a new challenge emerged. Not from a business competitor this time, but from the very system under which Alibaba had grown. Jack's outspoken nature and Alibaba's dominant stature were about to put him in the crosshairs of Chinese authorities, leading to a dramatic twist in his journey. The tech titan, who had weathered market battles, would soon face perhaps his most daunting test, navigating the complex intersection of innovation and regulation in China. Trials and transformation tech, Crackdown, and philanthropy. Even as Jack Ma stepped away from Alibaba's day-to-day operations, he remained one of the most influential figures in China, a prominence that carried its own risks. In October 2020, he delivered a speech at a high-profile financial forum in Shanghai that, in hindsight, marked the beginning of a turbulent chapter. In that speech, Jack criticized China's banking regulators and state-owned banks for being overly conservative, likening their approach to a pawnshop mentality and calling for bold reforms to support innovation. He argued that the regulatory framework was choking fintech growth and needed to evolve to foster entrepreneurship. These remarks, especially coming from someone of Jack's stature, were unusually blunt, even provocative by Chinese standards. Jack had always been outspoken, but now he was openly challenging the financial establishment. The timing could not have been worse. His fintech affiliate, Ant Group operator of Alipay and other services, was just weeks away from what was expected to be the largest IPO in history, aiming to raise approximately $34 billion. Chinese regulators saw Jack's comments as a direct affront. In a stunning move, they abruptly halted Ant Group's IPO in early November 2020. The message was unmistakable. Jack Ma's fame and success did not place him above the system. What followed was often described in media as China's tech crackdown. Chinese regulators concerned about the growing power of tech conglomerates in finance, retail, and data began scrutinizing Alibaba and its peers with unprecedented rigor. In late 2020, China's State Administration for Market Regulation opened an antitrust investigation into Alibaba. The focus was on whether Alibaba had abused its market dominance, for instance through practices like forcing merchants to sell exclusively on its platforms, a tactic rivals alleged. The investigation culminated in April 2021, with regulators imposing a $2.8 billion fine on Alibaba for anti-monopoly violations. While hefty, the largest such fine in China's corporate history, it amounted to only about 4% of Alibaba's 2019 domestic sales, a relatively small fraction of the company's vast revenues. Alibaba publicly accepted the penalty and vowed to ensure compliance with Jack's hand-picked successor, Daniel Zhang, steering the response. But beyond fines and IPO cancellations, there was a more personal consequence. Jack Ma vanished from the public eye. For months after the Ant IPO fiasco, Jack Ma went completely quiet. The once highly visible entrepreneur, known for his charismatic speeches at global forums and his engaging presence online, vanished from public view. His sudden silence sparked intense speculation. Was he under house arrest? Had he been permanently sidelined by the Chinese government? In truth, Jack was believed to be keeping a low profile at the urging of authorities. With China recalibrating its regulatory approach to tech giants, laying low was likely a strategic move to avoid further political scrutiny. Jack Ma resurfaced briefly in January 2021, appearing in a short video during a philanthropic event honoring rural teachers, part of one of his foundation's initiatives. In this video, he appeared subdued but calm and spoke about his renewed commitment to education and public welfare. It's the duty of our generation of businessmen to work towards rural revitalization and common prosperity, he said. Just a few minutes of appearance were enough to reassure the public that he was safe, but it was also clear that Jack Ma had deliberately stepped away from the spotlight. Away from corporate duties, Jack deepened his involvement in philanthropy and education areas he had been passionate about for years. Back in 2014, he had created the Jack Ma Foundation with a focus on improving rural education, empowering teachers, and fostering entrepreneurship in underserved communities. Now this became his primary outlet. Every year, the Foundation's Rural Teachers Initiative selects and rewards 100 outstanding rural educators across China, granting funding and support. Jack has frequently spoken about how teachers in remote villages, often working with few resources, are heroes shaping the nation's future. In one of his few publicized appearances in this period, Jack, now in his late 50s, visited a primary school in Hainan Province in January 2022 during a rural teachers event. There, he engaged via video call with 100 rural teachers from 24 provinces, discussing how quality education can lift people from poverty. This was a far cry from ringing the bell at the NYSE, but to Jack, it was deeply meaningful. Improving education in rural areas is crucial to alleviate poverty in our country, he had said as a UN Sustainable Development Goals advocate, emphasizing that if rural kids get good schooling, it can transform their lives. Beyond education, Jack's philanthropic work also included support for environmental causes and public health. During the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the Jack Ma Foundation and Alibaba Foundation sent medical supplies, masks, test kits, ventilators to over 150 countries around the world. It was Jack's way of leveraging Alibaba's logistics network for global good, and it won him international praise at a time when aid was much needed. Jack tweeted frequently about these donations, although by 2021, as he receded from public life, those updates ceased. As regulators reined in big tech, Jack also took steps to relinquish formal control in certain areas. In early 2023, Ant Group announced a restructuring plan to appease regulators, which included Jack Ma and other management agreeing to give up their voting control of the company, diluting their shares and influence to make Ant's ownership more broadly held and regulated like a financial institution. This move was likely hard for Jack, who had nurtured Ant from Alipay's inception, but he understood it was necessary. In essence, the Chinese government was drawing clear lines: innovation is welcome, but it must align with national financial stability and common prosperity goals, and no individual, no matter how successful, could be seen as too powerful or outspoken against the system. Thus, by the mid-2020s, Jack Ma's role had transformed dramatically. He went from being the globe-trotting tech evangelist and outspoken billionaire to a much quieter figure, focusing on charity and personal interests. There were reports of him spending extended time in Japan, pursuing hobbies like painting and studying agriculture and fisheries. In one instance, he was spotted visiting a Dutch university to learn about sustainable farming, reflecting perhaps a new intellectual curiosity post-business life. The man who once claimed, "I know nothing about technology," was now spending his time learning about soil and food security. For those who had followed Jack's journey, it was a poignant transition. Some wondered if his light had been dimmed by external pressures. Others saw it as a natural next step for an entrepreneur who had always said he'd return to teaching. Jack himself commented, "I want to die on a beach, not in the office." Having accomplished more than he ever imagined in business, he seemed at peace with handing over the reins and rediscovering life outside the corporate battlefield. In interviews before his retreat, he had often mused that he wanted to go back to education, to work with young people, and maybe to mentor entrepreneurs in developing countries. He even launched initiatives in Africa, like the Africa Netpreneur Prize, to support African startup founders with funding and mentorship, reflecting his belief that the next generation of dreamers should be given a chance. Despite the quiet period, Jack Ma's legacy in China and beyond remains monumental. In China, he became an icon of possibility, a living example that you don't have to be born rich or be a top student to create something huge. Young people nicknamed themselves aliens, a play on Ali to denote being part of the digital entrepreneurial wave. Small business owners who found success on Alibaba's platforms revered him for giving them a doorway to prosperity. Across Asia and other emerging markets, Jack Ma is frequently cited alongside figures like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk as a visionary leader. But unlike those Western counterparts, his story carries the special resonance of an underdog who made it big purely through grit and vision, rather than through elite education or early privilege. As Jack reduced his public presence, there was a sense of an era ending. The Chinese tech sector that he helped pioneer was growing up and facing new realities. But even out of sight, Jack's influence persists in the DNA of Alibaba and in the broader startup culture he helped ignite. Alibaba continues to thrive as a global player under professional management, and dozens of his former deputies and employees have gone on to start their own ventures, seeding the ecosystem with Alibaba's ethos. Fittingly, Jack's parting message upon retirement as chairman was that teachers always want their students to exceed them, and so he hoped the leaders coming after him at Alibaba would do an even better job. That was his teacher's heart speaking. The one constant, from giving free tours to tourists as a kid, to educating consumers and merchants about the internet, to now uplifting educators and entrepreneurs. Jack Ma's life has always been guided by a sense of purpose beyond self. Legacy of a Dragon Inspiration for the Next Generation. Jack Ma's journey from a small apartment in Hangzhou to the pinnacle of global business is more than just the story of one man. It's the story of a new era of entrepreneurship. Often nicknamed Alibaba's Dragon Jack, became the driving force unleashing a formidable enterprise that transformed how commerce is done in China and influenced business models around the world. His legacy can be felt in multiple dimensions: economic, social, and cultural. Economically, Jack Ma showed that China could innovate its own internet economy, not just follow Silicon Valley. Alibaba's success paved the way for a generation of Chinese tech companies, Tencent, Baidu, JD.com, and others, to rise with confidence. He demonstrated the power of the internet. To include the underdog Alibaba, empowered millions of small merchants and artisans to reach customers nationwide and globally. By prioritizing those small businesses and ordinary consumers, Jack created a platform that literally changed lives. There are stories of rural craftspeople who through Taobao found national markets for their products, lifting their villages out of poverty. There are entrepreneurs who started as tiny sellers online and grew into major brands thanks to Alibaba's ecosystem. Jack often said Alibaba's goal was to help the little guys, because he himself always identified as one of them. He's a young man who's willing to help others. That's why I chose the name Alibaba, Jack reminded people. That altruistic foundation is a key part of his legacy. A business empire built not just to make money, but to solve problems and enable others to succeed. Socially, Jack Ma became an unlikely folk hero. With his boyish smile, self-deprecating humor, and animated speaking style, he broke the mold of the secretive, stiff executive. He was equally at home cracking jokes on a TV interview, delivering sage advice to youth, or belting out Chinese pop songs at an Alibaba event. In a culture where failure often carried stigma, Jack openly talked about his failures and rejections, turning them into teaching moments. He famously quipped, "Harvard rejected me 10 times," with a laugh, and used that to encourage young people not to be deterred by setbacks. He turned his own story into a message: never give up, because you never know what opportunities tomorrow will bring. Never give up. Today is hard. Tomorrow will be worse, but the day after tomorrow will be sunshine. He liked to say, encapsulating the arc of struggle and reward that defined his life. For millions, Jack Ma became a symbol that dreaming big and persevering can truly rewrite your fate. Culturally, Jack bridged East and West in unique fashion. He drew on Chinese cultural references, from Kung Fu philosophy to crocodile in the Yangtze metaphors, to articulate modern business strategy, making global concepts relatable at home. Conversely, he introduced Chinese entrepreneurship to the world in a humanized way. It's powerful that a young person in India or Africa might look at Jack Ma and think, if he could do it, maybe I can too, even if they know little about China. He often told audiences abroad that the real heroes were the customers and young people, not himself. He positioned himself as a facilitator of their dreams. This humility and focus on people earned him respect worldwide. In 2017, Jack Ma was invited to be a special advisor to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, to help promote entrepreneurship and small business growth in developing countries. A nod to the broader relevance of his experience. One of Jack's deeply influential ideas in leadership was that of LQ, the love quotient. In an age of AI and automation, he emphasized that what differentiates us as humans is not just IQ intelligence or even EQ emotional intelligence, but our capacity for love, compassion, and creativity. To gain success, you need high EQ. If you don't want to lose quickly, you need high IQ, but if you want to be respected, you need high LQ. The IQ of love, Jack said at the World Economic Forum. It's a striking statement coming from a tech billionaire, essentially saying that empathy and kindness are competitive advantages and core to a meaningful life. This philosophy permeated how he treated customers. We consider customers, number one, employees encouraging a collegial mission-driven culture, and even competitors. He often praised rivals' strengths in public. It's part of why people who dealt with Jack often describe him as not just an astute businessman, but a genuinely warm, inspiring leader. Jack Ma's story also carries lessons in innovation and adaptability. He was not a coder or engineer, yet he grasped how technology could solve real problems. He surrounded himself with people who had the skills he lacked and gave them freedom to try new things. When banks wouldn't support online payments, he created Alipay. When Chinese shoppers worried about scams, he doubled down on a reputation system and consumer protection. When growth stalled, he pivoted or launched new ventures, like the move from C2C Taobao to B2C Tmall. He had an intuitive grasp of timing, entering the market at just the right moment or even a bit ahead, and exiting day-to-day roles when it was prudent. Aspiring entrepreneurs can learn from his balance of tenacity and flexibility. He never gave up on the big vision, but he was willing to change tactics, businesses, and even his own role to achieve that vision. In China, Jack's legacy is visible every November 11th, Singles Day, when a shopping carnival he popularized outshines Black Friday, and every time someone pays for street food with Alipay on their phone. It's in the improved livelihoods of rural farmers who sell produce online and the pride of Alibaba employees who chant the company's values at meetings. It's also evident in the philanthropic projects he championed, from building rural boarding schools to funding environmental conservation, planting seeds for long-term societal gains. Jack often said, "When you have earned billions, that money doesn't belong to you. It's a responsibility you hold for society." He backed that claim by setting up multi-billion-dollar charitable trusts and encouraging Alibaba's culture of giving. In doing so, he's nudged China's wealthy toward greater philanthropic awareness. For the next generation of dreamers in Asia, Africa, and everywhere, Jack Ma stands as proof that improbable things are possible. Here was a man who didn't fit the usual mold. He wasn't a top student, had no political connections, wasn't from a big city or a wealthy family, and even physically, he lacked the stature one might associate with a CEO. Yet, he built one of the largest companies in the world through vision, relentless effort, and the ability to rally others to believe in a dream. He often advised young people in your 20s, follow a good boss and learn. In your 30s, if you want to do something yourself, do it. In your 40s, focus on what you're good at. In your 50s, invest in young people. Beyond 60, spend time on yourself and maybe beach he'd add with a laugh. This life stage wisdom came directly from his own evolution. As Jack Ma enjoys his semi-retirement, he'll possibly teaching a class in rural China or advising a new startup founder over tea, his influence quietly continues. Alibaba thrives as a global tech titan, yet its founder has returned to being a humble educator at heart. It's a poetic, close to a remarkable cycle. The teacher who built a company that taught the world new ways of commerce is now teaching again, sowing wisdom for others to harvest. The boy who chased tourists on a bicycle has become a man who guides nations in chasing their dreams. Jack Ma's tale. Rich with failures and victories, solitude and community pragmatism and idealism, remains an enduring source of inspiration. It is a testament that no matter how many times you get knocked down, you can rise again. And sometimes you rise so high that you carry others with you. In the narrative of global entrepreneurship, Jack Ma's story will forever shine. Much like the Alibaba, he envisioned a magic lamp of opportunity that, when unlocked with perseverance, the true open sesame yields treasures beyond one's wildest imagination. Aspiring entrepreneurs running a small business or dreaming up a startup can look to Jack Ma and remember, a dragon can come from the unlikeliest of places, and its fire can light up the world.